2 o'clock. It is Tuesday, April 18th, our special call meeting, which is our regular work session for today. And I have asked Commissioner Tofteson to turn his phone off. And I've asked Commissioner Tofteson to lead us in the invocation, and Commissioner Swift to lead us in the invocation. If you'd rise, please.
Dear Lord, thank you for loving us and blessing us. Thank you for being our God. Thank you for allowing us to live in such a wonderful, beautiful place. We know that it's earth and that this is not heaven, so we know we have our troubles and all the things that go along with it. But allow us to please make good and solid decisions, and that we always keep our eyes on you. All in your Son Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge of allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 1 today is discuss changes in Glynn County's excess sales tax fund policy, payment policy, and we've got Will Worley here for us today. And Mr. Worley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you said, I'm here to ask y'all to consider some changes to our excess tax sale payment policy. For those of you who don't know, the tax commissioner periodically has tax sales. It's not uncommon for the highest bid at those tax sales to be in excess of the taxes that are owed on the property. When we have those kinds of excesses, we call those excess tax sale funds, and those tax commissioner takes those funds, hands them over to our finance department, and then we wait for someone to come make a claim to the funds. When someone does make a claim to those funds, those claims are forwarded to our office for processing, and then ultimately they make their way to the Board of Commissioners for final approval. Since I've been with the county attorney's office, our policy has always been, if you're making a claim to those funds, we need a letter or title opinion from an attorney stating that you are the claimant, the rightful claimant to the funds. That they've looked at the chain of title, you're the rightful claimant. There are other claimants that have a priority over you. And one thing that we've gotten asked over and over the years is, do I really have to go get an attorney? And particularly for the sort of lower dollar amounts of those excess funds. I mean, sometimes we have some that are $500, $600, $700, and folks say, do I really have to go to the expense of an attorney, which in some cases could exceed the amount of money that they're going to get back from the excess funds. So, again, since I've been here, the policy's always been, we need that title opinion from an attorney. Myself and Jason Wilbanks in our office primarily handle these, and we've been talking off and on over the years about ways to streamline that process, both for people making the claims and for staff and the board commissioners. And so what we have in front of you is sort of our thoughts on ways to streamline that process. And the biggest change that we're proposing is that many of the claims that come in are from the person who owned the property at the time of the tax sale. Or we get claims from either, most often the city of Brunswick for unpaid taxes on the same property, sometimes from the state for unpaid taxes on that property. And so what we're proposing, the biggest change we're proposing is that for claims that are $10,000 or less, that are from either the owner of the property at the time of the tax sale or from another governmental taxing entity, that they not be required to get a title opinion from an attorney. That instead, they just provide an affidavit that says they are entitled to the funds, and that they promise to be responsible for those funds when we pay those to them. So, and if it's a amount of time, 120 days since the day the tax sale has passed, and those are the only claims that we've gotten, then what we're proposing is that those claimants not be required to get a title opinion from an attorney, and that staff be allowed at their discretion to go ahead and pay those claims out to the claimants without having to go through the Finance Committee and the Board of Commissioners. Some of the other changes that we are proposing right now, we take claims from anybody who files them. We get claims from third-party asset recovery firms a lot. We get claims from folks who have a power of attorney on behalf of someone else. They're not an attorney themselves. They're not a professional, in any other kind of sense. They're just a friend or someone else, they say. So another change that we're proposing to the policy is that we only accept claims from either the claimant themselves or an attorney on their behalf. No third-party claims from these asset recovery firms or someone else saying they're claiming on behalf of someone else. A lot of times we kind of explore those when we get those and weed a lot of those out already. When we start asking follow-up questions, those seem to fall by the wayside a lot. But again, we're trying to make this a straightforward process for most claimants. They don't have to go get an attorney. They don't have to have anyone else intercede on their behalf. They can make a claim to us. They'll still file an affidavit, and they'll sign an indemnification hold harmless, and then we can pay those claims out without them having to go to the expense of hiring some professionals to help them with their claim.
All right, commissioners, do we have any questions on that?
The third party folk that you're weeding out, I mean, is that any liability? And I mean, I know you're an attorney. Any liability to us for doing it that way? I mean, can somebody slip through the cracks who have a rightful claim with just having it where you have to have an attorney or this other entity?
So when I say we weed those out, usually what happens is, what I mean by that is we start asking follow-up questions. Do you have some sort of signed document by the person saying that you're authorized to file this claim on their behalf? That kind of stuff. When we respond back to those claims, I'd say probably 9 out of 10 times we never hear back from that company. I don't know if it's because they don't have the documentation to back that up, or they don't feel like going to the work of doing that thing. So those weeding out cases are usually when we ask follow-up questions and say, well, hey, we've noticed this, or can you give some documentation to show this? And the vast majority of the time, we just never get any follow-up there.
Okay. All right.
Okay, Will, how did y'all determine the 10,000? Was there any consideration 7,500 or 15,000? What was
Yeah,
that?
we batted some numbers around. I think we started out thinking about $5,000, but looking at the number of claims we got, and we've had a lot of claims coming in the last 6 to 8 months. The tax commissioner did a big sale last summer, and it seemed like a lot of those properties generated excess funds. It seemed like 10,000 would capture more. 5,000 would capture some, but up to 10,000 captures enough to kind of make the change in the policy make more sense and be more justified. To try to, and if you go out and hire an attorney, and if they have to hire someone to do a title search and that sort of thing, $1,000 I think is probably easily a figure you can easily hit. And we started thinking about, well, $1,000 out of 5,000, it's probably still worth it for you to do that, but now, you're talking about 20% of what you're entitled to get back, you're going to have to pay someone else to do that.
So kind of looked at that 10% versus about 10. I got you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I think it's the goal of this commission to make doing business with Glynn County easier across the board, and I think this is one step that could ease some of that people that come to the county taking care of their personal business or any other faction. So, sounds good. And commissioners, anything else that you would, any other questions on this one? Gee, you got all.
These things still come to finance, right?
Well, so under the proposal, anything 10,000 or less, that's
Would not.
Would not.
Okay.
Now, we would still have some discretion, if we thought there was something a little strange about it or something that needed y'all's attention, we would still bring those to y'all. But if it's a straightforward, this is the owner of the property, there's no liens or anything on it, there's no other claims to the funds, then staff would have the option to just go ahead and pay that claim.
Yeah, because by the time they get to us, they've already been vetted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you.
Item number 2 on the agenda today is receive an update on the amendment to Chapter 2-11 of the Glynn County Code of Ordinance, and Ms. Garganis has that report for us.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Lisa Garganis, Recreation and Parks Director. For at least since probably August of 2019, we've been looking at the Chapter 2-11 Parks and Recreation Ordinances for Glynn County, knowing that there were some things that need to be tweaked and updated and revised. I've been working with Will Worley over that time. A lot of things have happened since then, and felt like that now with our county manager solidly in place, assistant county manager in place, board of commissioners in place, that it would be a good time to bring this item forward for your comments, your feedback, your discussion about some of the recommended revisions that staff has put together. Earlier this week, I sent out what I would like to call just an executive summary, or maybe it was last week, of the recommended revisions. Many of them are more housekeeping changes, things like updating our park names to what they actually are, adding the new park that was opened up last year at Glen Haven, and some of those kinds of things. We've incorporated the recent tennis pickleball schedule that the Board of Commissioners adopted on March 2nd. We've addressed some things like recreational vehicles parking overnight in the parks, a problem that's kind of surfaced recently in some of our parks. The changes eliminate the park abandonment procedures that are in one of the articles, just completely eliminates them, because as Will Worley said, whenever a park is abandoned, there are state laws that dictate how that is, so it didn't need to be in the county ordinance. We've updated some beach-related definitions and some rules that are common among coastal communities. That's some information that I gathered a couple years ago when we were looking into a beach safety initiative for the county, looked at some other communities and some of the ordinance that they had for their beaches, and thought that some of those might be good to bring here to Glynn County for St. Simon's. Even though they were not problematic for us, they were for these other communities. They could be for us, and so we've incorporated a few of those. We've revised the wording of how commercial activities can be permitted or not permitted on the beach to address that. And then there's not really, at least as I can tell when we're talking with Will, there's no process or anything that's stated in the ordinance currently about how rules can be established in the parks. Simple rules that address safety of the facilities, safety of the people using those park amenities, and so we've incorporated that would put that responsibility on the Recreation and Parks Director to establish rules for the use of those facilities. And those are things like swimming pools, where you have a rule that says no running on the pool deck, no horseplay. Children 3 and under must wear swim diapers. A tennis court rule where you have a rule where skateboards and rollerblades are not allowed because those could damage tennis court facilities. A rule such as no golf carts and no diving from the fishing platform at Blythe Island Regional Park. Those types of rules that are intended again to keep the people that are using those facilities safe, and to make sure that our property is not damaged by people doing things on those types of amenities other than what they are intended to be used for. So those are some of the things that we have incorporated into the revisions, and I don't know if you want me to go through them in more detail, or if that kind of overview is enough, and then I can entertain questions that you might have, or perhaps Will might can answer some questions if there are things I can't answer.
All right, thank you.
Is that good?
And commissioners, we'll just open the floor for questions from Ms. Garganis.
Yeah, well, if you want to go ahead and do your presentation, we can wait till you get finished, and then we can answer it, ask you any concerns that we may have as commissioners.
Okay.
Okay.
That wasn't the presentation?
that was kind of it, but I can go through it in more detail if you want to go through. Probably the best thing to do for whoever's running the show here is to get to the part where you've got the explanation of changes. I think the first 12 pages are the actual, is how the new ordinance would look after if it were to be adopted. So chapter 211, so you see a lot of blue there. So the blue are the section, or is the information that's added, that's recommended to be added. The items in red strike through are obviously to be deleted. So consolidating the term park within the ordinance, and again, addressing, making sure that we listed and named all of the parks, but we didn't handcuff ourselves. We've got it to include these parks, but not limited to those parks. So if new parks are added or names are changed, we can certainly address those. But you'll see Ahmad Arbery Park is in there, Glen Haven Park. So as you go through that to the next page, the term vehicle was updated. Just to incorporate, when these ordinances were probably last revised, I don't know that golf carts were as prevalent as they are now. So, golf carts, all-terrain vehicles, things like that were added. Under 2-11-2, the legal right to use the park in St. Simon's Pier, the item in green is an ordinance that was already included in the original ordinance, but it was moved to this location within the ordinance just as a better formatting and better location, and made more sense to be in this area as opposed to where it was. So it's not an addition or change, it's just moving it to another section. Let's see, skipping to the next page. Item 2-11-5 talks about restrictions on the park, and mostly that is removing a lot of the park names because we had those listed. So it's now park encompasses all of those places. And we did add about leaving a vehicle unattended or being in a park after the park is closed is a violation of the ordinance, unless it's therefore a permitted vehicle. Keeping on going, there's just the next page, 2 pages. We'll get to section 2-11-8 on the next page. This one does look kind of overwhelming because there's a lot of blue here. This is what I was talking about. So the ordinance didn't seem to have anything in here about establishing rules for the safe, proper use of our park facilities. And so this section, the title was changed to creation of rules and regulations for the park. And then the authority to establish those rules was put upon the Recreation and Parks Director to establish rules for the proper use of amenities. We have signs at pretty much every amenity that we have in our parks, whether it's a tennis court, a ball field, an outdoor basketball court, a picnic pavilion, fishing platform, the swimming area at Blythe Island Park. All of those have rules, again, advising people of the things they should do and should not do to keep themselves safe, the users safe, and then the people, then the park facilities safe. So those are the types of things that are intended with this, with Section 8 of this ordinance. It would not be things of great magnitude that would impact the park. And when I think of that, I think of an example a couple years ago in the parks and recreation industry. There was a big movement to ban tobacco in park facilities because of smoking or vaping and things like that, and completely banning them in parks. That type of thing is a global and a large, impactful change, and that would be something that would go through the Board of Commissioners and would be more of an ordinance update and added here. But I think by putting this in here, the thought was to not bother the Board of Commissioners with some of the day-to-day and more minuscule type things that we just do every day. Our staff does enforce the rules that are already posted at our parks. If somebody does not comply, we ask them to comply. 99% of them will comply. If they don't comply, then we ask them to please comply. And if they don't still, and we ask them to leave, then they leave the park. If they don't leave the park, then we ask for 911 assistance to help us get rid of somebody who's being problematic and who's not following the rules. And people that are not following the rules generally are the ones that are causing safety concerns. And again, that's mainly what this is all about, is just ensuring safety of the park users. Item B is the new tennis court schedule incorporated that was approved by the Board of Commissioners. So we've actually added that as part of the ordinance because that was a decision made by the Board of Commissioners. Part of that discussion at the board meeting a couple weeks ago was ensuring that the staff had the ability to enforce that sort of thing and address misbehavior that might be going on in some of our facilities. And so that is where item C comes in, is that, people have to follow the rules that are posted in the parks, and if not, they can be escorted and asked to leave.
So Lisa, is this anything to do with the pickleball agreement with the tennis court folks? And how's that going, by the way?
As far as we know, it's going well. I've had some questions asked about procedurally how these things should work. If the court's empty, who can use it? Whoever's supposed to, whatever group is supposed to be there is who's supposed to use it. It's going well as far as I can tell, yes, sir. We haven't had to suspend anybody or talk to anybody for acting up. So that's a good thing.
So don't come over and stir it up. It's quiet.
On the next page, can you move I don't know if y'all may be looking at, anyway, on the next page, the item I was talking about that was in green, that was moved to another area. This is where it was initially, and it's just moved to another area. Will felt like that was a better flow for the ordinance. The next item, 211.9, parking limited to park users, recreational vehicles. Yes, sir.
Let me ask you a question before we go to that part.
Yes, sir.
Are pets like dogs on leash, is that addressed in public?
It's addressed
In
in the
parks.
animal control ordinance. I think it's
Okay.
2-4. I think 2-4, and I think it's referenced in here later that that's where animals, like animals on the beaches and animals are addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. 211.9, the added item is addressing recreational vehicles in the parks, and basically saying that it's unlawful for folks to park overnight, leave unattended any recreational vehicle with sleeping accommodations, as long as it's not Blythe Island Regional Park or Altamaha Regional Park, where we have campgrounds that are intended for those purposes. So we added that to that. 2-11-11 is talking about hours of public access to the parks, which primarily our parks are, 7 a.m., 8 a.m. until 10 or 11, depending on where they are. Most of them are at 10, but if we have a ball tournament at some of our parks, obviously they may be open till 11. We have, within our facility rental agreements, we have restrictive hours for specific facilities and when they can be rented and that sort of thing. But most of our parks do not have gates. A lot of our smaller neighborhood parks are just open parks, but so those are generally like dawn to dusk because they're not lighted and that sort of thing. But this basically talks about us posting the hours of operation or open and closed hours at the parks. Yes, sir.
So with the parks being open, are they all lit, have light out there, I
No,
guess?
sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
I mean,
And so a neighborhood park such as Fairway Oaks or Waverly Pines, those are basically dawn to dusk hours because there are no lights in those parks. And they're in residential areas where you really don't want activities going on in unlit, in neighborhood areas where people don't want noise late at night. So the hours kind of do vary depending on what kind of park it is. In North Glynn, for example, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, it'll be open until then, accommodating whatever activity is going on. And usually there's staff out there to man those activities.
and there's no lighting out there either?
At North Glynn, no, yes, sir, there is. The ball fields and the tennis courts and those things, when we have activities going on, they may run to 10 or 11 o'clock at night with those activities.
No, I'm saying beyond that.
Oh, there's Georgia Power lights, parking lot lights and things like that, but those,
Okay.
like that has a gate that's locked and it can be locked and opened every day to restrict access. Let's see. Article 2, the special provisions is what that was changed to from the county park abandonment procedure. And again, that entire section was stricken because of the state law that dictates how park property is abandoned. The other item, the 211.1, St. Simon's Park, I think that was an ordinance change that was added about a year or so ago to accommodate special circumstances and special, the uniqueness of St. Simon's Park.
Lisa, can you just let him get caught up?
I'm sorry.
Who's back there, Quincy? Next page? There you go.
There we go. Yes, sir. So
Thank you.
that's not a new one, but it is newer. It was an update that was just made within the last year or so, I believe. Aaron might know for sure when it was, but just
Can you
recently.
highlight if there's something special about this part
About
of
the
the
thing with St.
ordinance?
Simon's Park,
Right.
that is the park that is across from, on Mallory Street, across from Mallory Park and adjacent to Kings Park. It's a beautiful park. I think there's some historic nature there, and basically what the Board of Commissioners wanted to do is anything that is done at that park, whether it's a tree limb removed, a tree planted, a tree having to be taken down, or anything, has to go and be approved by the full Board of Commissioners before that action can happen. And I believe that maybe once that something has come forward to take a tree limb down.
There was an oak limb,
Right.
yeah.
When was this adopted? 'Cause I don't recall.
When O'Quinn was on there.
I think Commissioner Quinn led that.
Okay.
Yeah, you voted for it.
I'm sure I did. I just don't recall the discussion.
It's basically, all those parks have a lot of physical improvements, but that's the one park in that triangle where it's a green park. And
Yeah,
there's
no, I agree with
also,
that. I just was trying to remember. I know we had some
yeah,
folks
also
doing a
ancient,
vigil for
ancient
trees or
Indian burial grounds in there too.
something. Yeah, so,
So it kind of, that's the holy park of all those triangle of parks in there.
okay.
Basically to be preserved as passive park space.
Right.
Is the intention, unless there's, the Board of Commissioners were to direct otherwise. Article 3 of the ordinance is all about beach control, and we have made some changes there. We've defined the word aircraft and clarified some things with dune field, ordinary high water mark. That was just a mistake. I think that was in there. I think it said ordinary low, so we've clarified that to ordinary high water mark. So updated those definitions. And then if you go to section 211:15, it was talking about a permit required, and now it's, regulation of use and conduct. The title of that has changed. Commissioner Sweat, this is where we talk about animals on the beaches, be governed by the county ordinance section 2.4.
Okay.
On the next page, items C, D, E, F, and G. Those were all recommended new ordinances to be added related to the beach. And again, those are some of the ones that whenever I did the study on other beach communities, some of the ordinances that they had. And they had a lot of them. They had a lot of other things that were listed, but I felt like maybe some of these would be important to include here. Item D, particularly with the reasonable command of the lifeguard, I thought that was a good one to include because we have lifeguards on the beach, and some of them are just out of high school, some are in college, and they perform an important service out there, and I feel like it was important to just distinguish that they do have the ability and the authority to issue a reasonable command to somebody, again, for that person's safety. And if somebody were to not comply with that reasonable command of the lifeguard, that lifeguard would seek the assistance of Glynn County Police Department if that person became belligerent and unruly and was becoming a danger to either himself or herself or the surrounding beach-going community.
What specific law would they have broken? If it's
said-
a request from a lifeguard and you're going to get the police involved,
Well,
what are they going to be charged with?
I don't know what they would be charged, but just asked to be removed from the beach or taken off the beach. Somebody that's maybe too drunk to be, that's wanting to go swimming, a lifeguard may say, you don't need to go back in the water. You're really going to endanger yourself if you go swimming now because you're really intoxicated.
Would a ticket result from that? Or
That might-
an arrest?
I don't know if it would be that or just to have the assistance of it. Seems like whenever somebody with a badge and a gun shows up, people have a better tendency to comply than they do than just somebody with a lifeguard uniform on.
If we're going to that's going to be an ordinance change, and it sounds vague the way you're describing it and what they can and can't do. I have a problem with this commission, but what about future commissions? And that it's going to be sitting there trying to cipher this out, and future directors of Parks and Recreation. Somebody will replace you one day down the road, 50 years from now, but that just seems to be very, very vague. And I think that needs some clarification because I can see where a young teenager, high school lifeguard tells a guy my age or whatever, you can't do this, and I can see where there could be some blowback from that.
Let me ask as a follow-up, I mean, what happens if they're at a pool and somebody's unruly?
It's the same thing. We would ask them to comply.
So what's the governing piece for that?
Well-
Is it our regular rules and
It'd
regulations?
be regular rules and regulations.
So
that
do
are-
we have the same thing for the beaches?
It would be basically the same thing, yes, sir. If somebody's not complying with the rule that's in the park or at the beach, and after being asked, to follow a reasonable command, I mean, not something unreasonable, but a reasonable command, slow down, or, don't run on the pool deck, or, again, we don't think you need to go back in the water because you're intoxicated or whatever, some issue.
So those are backed up by our ordinance to protect the public.
That's the
basically.
intention, that's the intention of it, but I understand Commissioner Tosison's concern, how it could be vague, but that's how I interpret it, is the things that we would be asking people to do are, again, for their safety, and for the safety of the facility, for safety of the lifeguards even, because if they have to go in after somebody who they've repeatedly said, you can't swim, or you're causing problems, you're causing a disturbance here on the beach, then whether it's the
And
beach
the
or the
beach
park.
is under our purview as the county. And so then we set the rules for those things, just like we would the pool. And then somebody who's violating that, our staff decides, and that's pretty subjective based on what our rules are. And because somebody may be, had a few drinks, but they're not really displaying any kind of drunkenness. But somebody who's had one drink, but they're falling all over the place, then they're really required to look at the safety of those folks, correct?
I mean, and I would envision it as if somebody's not reasonably trying to comply with whatever's being asked of them, then, we would seek a law enforcement personnel, not necessarily to arrest them, but just to talk to them and try to help them
Right, to keep
understand
them safe.
that what they're doing, yes, sir, that what they're doing might not be the safest thing to do. I mean, you couldn't keep somebody from going in the water if they're intent on going into the water, couldn't arrest them for that or cite them, but to try to just, again, the public safety.
Yeah, and I remember in my first term, we had this great discussion about it because of the sandbars and folk going over there, how to get them off, and some people don't realize when they go over, and Cap, you probably know which ones, it's actually deep water.
We were looking at pictures of them yesterday.
Yeah, and so that safety piece is a major thing. I remember us talking about it in the work session. And so, yeah, I mean, those rules and regulations are there now. To Commissioner Tostison's questions, is there a way to strengthen those? So I think that's what he's asking.
Or better define them.
Or maybe there's a
Better
reword.
to define them and be a little bit more, because think about it like this. Something all that happens, a lifeguard gets on to somebody, or this, that, and the other. The blowback comes to the commission. It doesn't come to you. It doesn't come to your staff. We get the blowback from it. And it's because we approved something that, we didn't really look into it deeply enough to make sure that, everybody was protected and that there's no repercussion from it.
And Commissioner Thompson, are you concerned with staff now or in the future with sort of a Barney Fife complex that may interpret it in such a way that they're overstepping or being overzealous in their interpretation, or?
Exactly.
I'm trying to understand.
And you hit a nail on the head for that. Plus, how would future commissioners be able to interpret that and be able to respond to it, and parking staff down the road be able to respond to that? It just needs some clarification on it. And it needs to be, maybe that's something that Aaron can do, and maybe when he writes this ordinance, that he can cover those and maybe go into that next level with it. I mean,
We can add specificity to it, absolutely.
I just know that, it just seems like we're complicating an ordinance or making it so vague that it can get complicated. And let's try to make things less complicated.
Yeah, I guess for me, we have to be, I'm comfortable with, and I know we don't know who we're gonna hire, who's gonna be in your position, or John, he just got here, years down the road, but, those open access to public facilities, most folk understand that there's some rules, to those, and that's what the staff is out there for. And so, that has to be, I mean, for me, I'm comfortable with it. If there's a way to make it, stronger, then fine, but the basicness of, this is a county facility, this is owned by the public, there are rules, you can't come in here and create your own rules, and that's what the staff is here for, then, I'm comfortable with it, with the staff. Hopefully we'll have at least 99% of our folk who will just enforce the rules without thinking they're, the sheriff or somebody, so.
So the other piece of the ordinance, and I may be wrong, Aaron Will can correct me, but seems to address more of the parks, and says this one is focused on the beach. So while we seem to have, we've kind of covered park staff, park and recreation staff being able to enforce the rules in the county parks, that with the posted rules, this is kind of giving that same authority to the staff, but just on the beaches. So that's kind of what that was intended. But certainly we can look at clarifying this and making it clearer so that it's not too vague that somebody's not going to.
Yeah, future clarity.
Yes, sir.
That's it in a nutshell, yeah. So that everybody else will be able to understand it down the road.
Yes, sir.
Lisa, and I think you touched on this, but you canvassed some other communities, like, for example, on beach control. Did you cover what kind of regulations they had?
I did, yes, sir.
Would like Tybee Island or some of those places?
This is my spreadsheet from a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I looked at St. Simon's, of course, Tybee, Edisto Beach, Hilton Head, Isle of Palms, Myrtle
okay.
Beach, Wrightsville,
Yeah.
Walton County, Cloco, Palm Beach, Fort Myers, St. Augustine,
Right.
and just went down the list of different beach-related rules and kind of did a little checkbox of who had rules associated with this one
Thank
or
you.
that one. So.
You just kind of picked the ones that you thought would apply for us here locally?
I didn't think all of them, I did, yes, sir. I mean, we could go back and look at all of them. And I believe it when we first started looking, again, because this was probably 2020, we were working on this piece of it. It was, some of them were like releasing balloons. Some beaches have ordinances against releasing balloons because of the impact it may have on sea life. Some have ordinances related to generators on the beach, which I think DNR probably covers that more so. Aircrafts and parasailing, horses and manure removal, which we actually already do have that, but so some other communities. So I looked at a variety of things that other beaches were doing and thought what might be good in our area.
I will add this, I know that you touched on airplanes and stuff like that. Maybe the ordinance should add drones to that as well. I don't know if you thought about that part of it, or if that would be something that needs to be considered. Maybe they have to have a permit to fly a drone, because I can see where a drone could fly over a sunbather or something like that and be photographing and things like that.
I think we talked about it, looked at it, but I think those are dictated by the FAA because of the proximity to the airport on the beach.
Actually, Commissioner Tossin, the definition of aircraft that we put in there includes a drone.
Oh, okay, that applies.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Well,
they're
thank you for
prohibited
that.
from taking off or landing from the beach.
Unmanned aerial.
And if you're, I don't know if you recall, but 2 or 3 summers ago, and one of those ultralight gliders was swooping around on the beach, and we were like, oh my goodness, and community development was involved, and we were involved in trying to figure out, and that's where some of the aircraft rules came from, and definition changes, because we wanted to include that as well.
Earlier you'd talked about it would be unlawful to remove sand from the beach. Is it unlawful to remove driftwood from Driftwood Beach?
It is.
Well, I saw somebody toting off almost more than they could carry a few weeks ago over there.
I'm
And,
pretty sure.
but I didn't play policeman, I just observed. But
So any amount of sand? I mean, if somebody want to take a bucket,
A
they
cup
be,
and a pail.
yeah.
I think some of these other areas were having and again, as to Commissioner Tosselson's point with some questions he asked me earlier, these have not been issues here. They're issues that other beach communities have, but I thought, well, it might be nice to put that in there. Some beach communities have, it's in their ordinances that you cannot dig a large hole or any holes, and you have to fill them in. That's actually written in their ordinances, but didn't include that here for us. But there are some things that other communities have experienced that again, looking at this a couple of years ago, I was like, well, that seems like a good one.
But like they dig a hole, they're not taking the sand, they're just digging a hole, correct?
Right.
And I understand that it would be a good thing to take sand out of the dunes, but say, what are we in a, and I know that sand on the beach, will come back. It's renewable. But I was just thinking that, there's an emergency situation and people needed sandbags and they weren't able to get them, or go down there, they could go to the beach and get sandbags for, emergency purposes, hurricanes and things like that. And that to me, that seems very vague, the way it was written. And so I was just wondering for a little clarity on that too. I mean, is it unlawful to go get you some sand to put in the sandbag to protect your home? It's public beach.
The way it's written, I would say that would be not an authorized use, but
Yeah,
I mean, if that needs to be taken out, I mean, we can certainly amend these to whatever you guys are comfortable with.
And you and I, and most of the stuff you responded to me on my email, and you actually cleared up a lot of stuff for me. But I just had a couple of numbers that I had questions that I wanted to ask you about.
And if that like,
And that was one of them.
yes, sir. And if C is something that needs to be removed from this, that we can certainly revision as well as clarifying D.
Lisa, I wonder what the DNR's answer to taking beach sand off would be.
Well, I can't worry about what DNR says. I'm just worried about what the county, what our policies would be.
But we don't want to do something.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of things we'll approve, and then it's subject to DNR approval as well. So I don't want to stand in the way of something like that. I wouldn't want the county or the commission to stand in the way of something that may be, that may save somebody's home or whatever. The DNR tells them, no, you can't do it.
We're in a crisis, the chairman.
The DNR tells them they can't do it.
I agree with you.
You may have somebody out there taking sand out of the dune, which is, you can't.
Well, I don't know if you heard me, and I said dunes were not, I understand the dunes part of it, but beach sand, on the beach, actually.
Okay.
Perhaps the wording could change to dune field or something. That's one of the definitions.
Yeah.
Or something, if y'all want it to stay in there.
And I had item number 7, it seemed to be vague to me, about the commercial activities on the beach.
Yes, sir. Let me get to that
I
one.
think you went past that one already. I want to come back to that.
It's right, item 2-11-20. This section used to be labeled or titled Use of Beaches for Commercial Purposes. It's been reworded to Commercial Activities Restricted. And the rewording, basically what was written in this ordinance is not something that was done. It talked about a process for permits to be issued, but there is no process actually in place. So what this rewording, what this change does, is actually provides that mechanism for the Board of Commissioners to entertain requests from people that want to conduct commercial activities on the beach, to be able to come to you with that request, to you as the Board of Commissioners, and for y'all to then decide if you want to approve or deny that request for commercial activity. Like an example is when I came here, I think the county had already started issuing requests for quotes for concession sales on the beach. And so I've continued that because that was an action that was done by a previous board where concession sales on the beach are permitted by this body. And so we go out for bid every year, every 2-3 years to do that and have on the beach sales with the DNR's approval. An example of this might be somebody wants to go set up a tent on the beach and sell koozies and, St. Simon's koozies and flags or something. if they wanted to do that, they would come to you as the Board of Commissioners to request approval to do that, and y'all would either authorize it or not authorize it.
Would that be permitted through Parks and Recreation or Community Development, or both?
I think if y'all approved it, then it would be back on the staff to develop a contractual arrangement, a concession license agreement that we've got for like concession operations, to work with that person or any vendor, any business that y'all said y'all did want to permit to have an commercial activity on the beach.
And
You would approve it, and then we would work the logistics.
That just seems kind of vague too. But I'm going to give you an example. Kat probably will relate to this. Berry's Beach Service, for instance, they're on the beach. They've been on there for years. Would somebody like that be grandfathered in?
They kind of have been, yes, sir, and they get a permit through the Community Development Department.
So they
to
get
do
through the
that.
Community Development. Parks and Recs is not involved in that.
That's correct, that's correct. We're informed that they've gotten their permit for the year, and that's pretty much the end of that.
Okay. And that's kind of the direction you would go in with this here as well?
We could do that, yes, sir. We could, but there's not a real formalized process. So whether it's a contract that is entered into with the county and the vendor to do provide whatever commercial activity on the beach that's agreed upon, we could do it that way, or some permit process with community development.
Well, that just seemed vague as well.
And the photographer piece is added on there because we do have a lot of folks who enjoy going to the beach, and they like taking family portraits or engagement pictures, high school senior pictures, things like that. So the commercial photographer language was added so that they can go do what they need to do on the beach, and then, because a lot of that stuff happens, and it's hard to regulate. You couldn't regulate that anyway, because a lot of that happens in so many different areas of the beach.
Yeah, I was about to say, how would you?
You could, that'd be too difficult to regulate. So that's why that was added. And that is pretty much the gist of my presentation. If there are
Thank you.
other questions, and
Ms.
I really
Gerber.
appreciate y'all's feedback.
Well, thank you for giving me the information that I requested. I appreciate it very much. You've answered a lot of questions that I had a lot of answers for, but your responses were wonderful.
Any other discussion on
Well, just a
this?
little bit, I was waiting to see how the rest of the commissioners weighed in. So, for the lifeguards and their authority and so forth like that, we have lifeguards out there basically from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And that's also when we have the police bike patrol out there. So I don't know that it's a necessary thing to have this in about the lifeguards. I defer that to Lisa. That when somebody's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and the lifeguard should feel empowered, motivated by safety, to be able to talk to somebody and say, don't be doing this. So I don't have any strong feelings one way or another on it. I'm just sharing with you what I see goes on. That we do have a police patrol out there during that time. Then let's see what I had here. The other thing I wanted to jump back to was the RV park that you had in there. And I guess this was a question for the attorneys and everything. As you know, we get calls on a certain group of RVs that are on the causeway all the time, or other right-of-ways in the village and so forth like that. So I haven't heard anybody come up and address that issue. I know we were looking at our ordinances for homeless and so forth like that, but it doesn't deal with RVs. But with the state, I understand we have an agreement with the state for the care of the right-of-ways on the causeway and so forth like that, on the bridges. How does the RV situation in those applications, can they be a part of this?
Well, they can, Commissioner, that's a good question.
How would they be? Because that's not Parks and Recreation.
Right away.
But, yeah, it's right away, but we're talking about including it on on the ordinances that are coming forward.
Right, yeah, but I
We do
just-
address it.
I wanted to ask, what the best flow to address it.
Right.
And my concerns out there mainly also is where are these people dumping their sewer?
That I don't know, but I mean, we could, it wouldn't have as good of a flow to the chairman's point. If you put it in the Parks and Recreation ordinance, you can, and have it be effective. We are working on that through the overnight camping ordinance that
Okay.
is presently being developed and detailed. So that's probably the more appropriate place to put that, where, whether you camp out or overnight camp in a county park, on the county right of way, or any other county property, it will address those things. And so it has more synergy in that place than it would in this ordinance. But that is something we'll bring to the board shortly for y'all's review, but it'll address those things.
So this would be specific to the parks, under the jurisdiction of that department?
This is correct.
Okay.
Correct. And we have a right of way ordinance that is separate than this one. We have the Parks and Rec, and they're separate. Sometimes there's some overlap as far as principles and concepts, but in this context, the overnight camping, RVs, or just or park camping will be addressed in those things.
That's fine, I just wanted to make sure.
Quincy, can you go back down to the explanation page to 21111? So one thing I just wanted to point out, so if you look at 21111A, all parks should be open to the public during designated hours that are posted, so the park hours are posted. Can you go back to 229, to the pickleball and tennis? And so one thing I would suggest you consider here, going to your point about down the road, so this could change. So right now, this is tennis court shall be reserved exclusively for pickleball between 7:30 and 10:30, Monday, Wednesday, whatever it might be. Do we need to change the policy if, a couple of years down the road, this needs to change, versus just posting it? So going back to kind of along the lines of whatever is posted, and then we just enforce what's posted instead of having it in the actual policy, because we might see this change next year.
So we approved it for a year.
Yeah, just for a year ago.
But this is putting it in the ordinance.
This-
It had to come back
see,
to the
what's going
ordinance.
on today is this is gonna be permanent. And I'm just thinking that before we do that, we need to get the vagueness out of this. And so that there's be no misunderstandings about it. And it's a clear document, it's a clear ordinance, where it can be challenged or questions that could be raised. So I'm thinking that maybe we could defer this until we actually can sit down and fine tune it. It's just got a lot, not everything is vague. A lot of things are clear, but there are several items that need clarification.
So I agree that you approved it and we approved the hours, but does it need to actually be in this policy versus just being posted? And then if it does change a year from now, then it can just be reposted with whatever the board approved.
It has to be in there.
Yeah.
I think it's either way, we have it posted for Selden Park hours or other hours. I mean, we
That's
have
right.
hours,
Yeah.
not just posted, but in the ordinance too.
Yeah, but I think he's talking about pickleball and tennis.
Yeah, he's just one particular item.
Don't start that conversation again.
You're trying to make it easier.
It's all quiet right now.
It's still gonna be
I
enforced.
understand.
Yeah, it's still gonna be the same. It's just-
Yeah, I don't see why it's in there, because
I would take that out.
I thought we were asked to put it in here, but I don't remember. But it absolutely can be removed, and just like Mr. Fallon said, it is what the formal direction from the board, and it will be enforced as such, and it's posted already. We could remove that easily from here.
yeah, because we didn't know if the agreement was going to work, to me, in that whole discussion.
That's on me, then I misunderstood. I thought that it needed to be included in the ordinance, but we can certainly remove that.
Well, I think on all of this, we put this out for renotice through and posted it through in my district, which most of it's talking about. Most of the forever comes about. I hadn't had any really feedback of concern or negative on anything.
Well, that's why this work session is so important.
Yeah, and that's why I was waiting for the rest of y'all to weigh in what your thoughts are. So, I mean, I'm definitely for tightening it up wherever we need, but so far the overall public hadn't, maybe they've been diverted with all the other things going on.
When we don't want them to. We want them to enjoy it and
Yeah, that's
not get
right.
all caught up in the weeds on it.
Okay. Well, we're not voting on this today anyway, but are you asking that it not be on Thursday night's agenda?
I am.
Okay.
Until we
Agenda is
can- until we
posted, so
can-
all we can do on Thursday night is defer it again. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion on this before we move on? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 3 today is to receive an update on SPOS 2022 planning and project schedule. Mr. Jason Hagan. Jason, before you start, were we able to repair any kind of link or open any other kind of link to the report? Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm sorry? There's an issue with Civic Plus, there's a ticket's been submitted, they're working on it. As soon as they can get restored, it'll be.
And we don't have any other avenue by which to open.
Yeah, I did too.
Access to that.
Yeah, I put plenty of calls
And-
there too.
You can have that up.
And just for the record, we're denied access to it too, here in the building. So it's not just on the feedback to the public.
Can you blow it up some?
What if it can enlarge the screen?
This one, you want
It's hard to read.
Shrink it down, is the process. You see that?
That's all right. Go ahead. All right.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jason Hagan, Program Director. What you have before you today is our plan to work the SPLOST 2022 project schedule. We've devised this plan by taking money coming in and then balancing it by what we believe the project's cost, the estimated price, and then also staff hours, department hours, manpower, and this is the list you have before you. And so what we've done is we've taken every single project in SPLOST in Tier 1, laid it out, and the ultimate goal is to not have to borrow, but there is always the opportunity, there could be a chance that we would have to borrow, but we would like not to, and so that's our goal. And so we've got the project schedule here, and on the next page, Quincy, could you roll that down for me, please? The next page shows the projects that we will borrow from ourselves to start. As you know, the collection started in April. We'll get our first disbursements in May.
Can you reduce that to see is the start date is on that?
Can you reduce that, Quincy, please?
Oh, it's just the cost. Okay.
And so what we have here, these are the projects.
Is there a start date on these two, Jason? I think you might have to reduce it one more.
I don't think.
No, I don't think there
Okay, not on this one. Okay.
The plan here is, we want to get design started on as much as possible and understand what our acquisition issues may be, what our right-of-way issues may be, so that we can get those issues resolved quickly and bring these projects in on time. And so the projects that we've selected here are a lot of the design projects that we've got. So with your approval on Thursday night, this is the plan that we will set forth.
Jason, if you don't mind, if I could, just add a couple of things. So if you could go back to the other sheet that you had, the first one.
Sure.
Yeah, just if you go up and you can look at this, so we can break this down by date as well. So some of the things that we talked about, obviously, we want to start some of those complex projects early. We want to get going on the design, like Jason mentioned, the right-of-way, so we're not looking at potential right-of-way issues, 3, 4, 5 years from now. We want to get going on those now. We also looked at trying to, kind of spread it out across the entire county. So we looked at some of the more complex projects, maybe some of the easier projects too, some of those quick wins that we could actually get done. And then we looked at mainland versus the island. And even within the mainland, we tried to look across the different districts that are out there, just to make sure that we were trying to touch as much of Glynn County as soon as possible moving forward. But keeping in mind that that bond rates and other debt at this point is fairly high, so we wanted to try and do as much as we could with our internal money. And so one thing I also wanted to point out is that there may be some need for some of these things to get adjusted in the future. We're working with GDOT on some of these programs or some of these projects, so we might have to start some of these earlier than we anticipated. So I'd ask you to consider this as kind of our game plan for now, but there could be some slight changes with some of these start dates. And we still could go back out and potentially have to borrow against some of these projects to get them started earlier rather than later. So, but this is kind of the blueprint for now, and I think that it's very well thought out. We were able to get that analysis done, that financial analysis done to make sure that we tried to save as much money as possible and use those existing funds that we have to get going. So we started collecting in April. We'll receive the first check May 31st, and the percentage of that goes to our partners as well, but that will take into account a lot of these projects moving forward. So thank you, Jason.
Commissioners, any questions for Jason? We had the opportunity to review this prior to today's work session. Jason, thank you for setting that up. We've been able to ask some questions, and I think we're on board with our plan. I think we're answering the community's request that we are more timely in our projects. I think we've set up a good pathway so that we can be. The community asks that on certain projects we engage outside sources to help with those projects. We're in the process of doing that. And on some of the smaller projects, the community asked us to have a project manager, Mr. Hagan. So we've set that up. So in response to the community, I think the commission has listened well. I think we've responded. We recognize some of the problems of the past SPLOST and trying our best to address those. I think this is going to be a very successful SPLOST, and everyone is totally committed to make sure that this is going to demonstrate our sincerity in moving these projects along. So thank you, Jason. And
Thanks, sir.
any other comments for Mr. Hagan? All right.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you,
Thank
Jason.
you. Okay, we do have an executive session for the so personnel. Is there any other executive session item today? So I need a motion to go into executive session for personnel.
Motion to go into executive session for personnel.
Second. Who's second? All right, have a motion by Commissioner Fendig, a second by Commissioner Sweat to go into executive session for the purpose of personnel. All in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, we stand Have a motion to come out of executive session by Commissioner Rafalski, a second by Commissioner Booker. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Any other business to come before the commission today?
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion